The Research Information Service is part of the service librarians, and as the name clearly implies, we look after researchers. The areas I look after are QAAFI, SAFS, School of Biological Sciences, the Global Change Institute, the more biological part of GPEM, and a few other things as well. It'll become clear everything that I was asked to do as I go through the PowerPoint, so that's what we're going to do. Go through some PowerPoints to map the territory, and then I will go through the same territory live on various platforms, and we're going to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. There are 3 handouts over there which you could grab on the way out if you like. Just broadly, there are 2 broad topics here, closely related topics. One is, as it explains there, the problem of maintaining your author identity. When one of you comes to me and asks for help with preparing metrics for a grant application or something of that order, one of the first things I'll ask from you is your bibliography, or somewhere where you have an up-to-date bibliography, and I'll also ask you for your institutions that you've worked in, because unless you have a very uncommon name, when I go to various platforms to run metrics, the first problem I will have will be identifying which publications are actually yours, and we can't really do that without a lot of cross-checking. So, by the way, if you are going to ask us for that help, you need to get to us with more than a day or 2 in hand. So we experience this problem in that way. We see that there are lots of names that, to my eyes, look fairly uncommon, which turn out to have a lot of people of that name with similar initials and so on. You, I imagine, certainly Barbara, who asked me, experience it from the other end. And so our first topic will be about how to achieve easily and uniquely your identity, which you can attach in various ways in various places. Our second object will be to look at some of the places where you network, and the territory there is very confusing. I actually am not going to be directive, especially about that latter matter, but I hope that by mapping out the territory and giving you some numbers, it'll be easier for you to make choices about where you want to network. So what we're talking about is achieving, everyone knows what a DOI is, so something like, let's work something like a DOI for yourself, and which you can put in various places. So if you can bring stuff into UQ eSpace and stuff gets pumped out of UQ eSpace into various processes and into the UQ researchers site. And you can use some of those quasi-DOIs at the bottom of your email or in any websites that you're on and so forth. Some of them will be pumped into places like UQ researchers. So we're going to look at Researcher ID, which is a product of the same people who provide the Web of Science platform, and therefore those 2 things interact. We're going to look at a thing called ORCID, which I've got the date on a slide. I think it's been running since 2012, which is, well, we'll get to it. We're going to go to the platform Scopus, Google Scholar, eSpace, as I already mentioned, and academic networks, as I already mentioned. So that's UQ Researcher, and as you can see, that Researcher identity for Robert Henry is pumped into that from UQ eSpace. UQ eSpace is currently working on pumping ORCID identities into there, and I imagine I didn't specifically talk to them about this, but I imagine they will do the same with Scopus IDs and Google Scholar IDs as well. So the whole thing ramifies. So here's a person on a database platform who has a not terribly common name, yet who has multiple identities. So there's the problem. In case you come here thinking, what is the problem? Well, that probably means you haven't got the problem. Maybe you have a fairly uncommon name, but that is the problem. RID, or Researcher ID, links to and from the Web of Science. So you can bring in your publications from the Web of Science into Researcher ID, or you can be in Researcher ID and go down to Web of Science and bring them back up into Researcher ID. And by giving people your Researcher ID identity, you can let them look at your work. You can close you can have your Researcher ID account closed. I don't know why you do that, but if you do have it closed, of course, other people aren't going to be easily accessing your body of work. Not particularly in applied fields, not everything that you've published is going to be in, and actually I probably should have been a little bit more explicit in that slide, but when people talk about Web of Science, they often using the term loosely, obviously, including librarians sometimes. Web of Science is a platform on which there are a range of databases. The one that people are usually thinking about when they say Web of Science is called Web of Science Core Collection. It wasn't always called that. They did some rather unhelpful name changes last year, I think it was. So Web of Science Core Collection is the database on the Web of Science platform which accumulates citation counts. So if you bring from Web of Science Core Collection into Researcher ID, you get a citation count. If you, as many people in QAAFI will need to go elsewhere to get some of your publications, if you get them from databases on the Web of Science platform like ABSCTRACT, which at the moment is still there even though library management has cancelled it, you won't get the citation counts. Citation counts only occur in databases in Scopus and Web of Science Core Collection, and as you know, they occur within other platforms. Like if you're on the Science Direct site and you're looking at a journal article you've written, you'll see that there's an accumulating count for how that article has been cited by other authors who've published in journals published by Elsevier, the Science Direct people. So Researcher ID looks like that. We'll go live to it later on, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but you can see the Researcher ID number there, which you can search Web of Science Core Collection with, and I'll do that later with someone's Researcher ID number. There's multifunctional stuff here. You can create a badge, that is, you can create a little, and it's on another slide, a little Researcher ID identity which you can pop onto websites or at the bottom of your email and so on. You can go into your publications in Researcher ID and produce maps of your collaboration, your people who are citing you and so on. In eSpace, if you send them an email, if you want to, just go to eSpace and look in the FAQs. If you're not sure about it, just ask me and I'll send you the address. But you can ask eSpace, just to clarify, eSpace is run by the library and it's the open access repository at UQ, out of which, as I said before, various things are pumped out for ERA and HERDC and so on. So that's what your Researcher ID count will look like in your eSpace page. Okay, I've said all of that. Oh, but just, and that's what the badge looks like if you create one. ORCID. So that was created, it was launched in 2012, it was built up over a year or so before that. with various publishers like the major science ones, Springer, Elsevier, and various other participants to try and stabilise author identities. So it's trying to be an identity that's across all platforms. So Researcher ID, as you saw, was an identity that's associated with the Web of Science, but usable elsewhere, as I've already said, like in eSpace. But ORCID is an attempt to stabilise that across a lot of platforms. And you can ramify from one to the other. You can get them to recognise each other. So when you are looking at Scopus search results, you'll see that option there. Later on, I'll go I'll go from Web of Science into Researcher ID, and you'll see it asks a question about whether you want to associate your Researcher ID with ORCID. And that's what an ORCID page looks like. As you can see, this person has a Scopus author ID and a Researcher ID as well. When your papers are ingested into Scopus, they create an author ID for you, and it looks like that. It doesn't mean that that smooths out everything to do with your author identity on Scopus, as you'll see. So the ideal is to end up like that, with just one U on the Scopus site. But to do that, you might have to do things, and again you'll see this later on, like merge authors, and as you can on the Web of Science site, you can request corrections to details about particular publications or about yourself, what's yours and what isn't yours. But yes, there's our aim, to have one identity. That's just what someone's identity, someone's metrics look like on Scopus. As you can see, there's that author ID number there, and there's this person's ORCID number there. And that's how your Scopus publications will look in eSpace. Google Scholar. Google Scholar can be particularly significant if you're publishing, as a lot of people in applied areas do, a lot of conference papers, a lot of book chapters and so forth, or other publications which are not necessarily going to appear in peer-reviewed journals or in journals at all. Google Scholar is ingesting material from platforms like eSpace. So it's not just, it is taking stuff from publishers. So again, say Elsevier or Springer Link, they have an arrangement with Google whereby they can dump their publications into the Google Scholar database. But also, and if you go to eSpace, you'll see links in eSpace to a couple of things, but one of which is Google Scholar. So Google Scholar's spiders go out and ingest stuff from eSpace. So that means that if you've put something, a pre-publication thing, a conference paper, a book chapter, or a range of publication material that might not be in, say, Scopus, say, Web of Science, is going to be ingested into Google Scholar. That's why Google Scholar is, in terms of numbers, is often a successful thing to use. It's an awkward thing to use because you can't construct complex searches, and I guess everyone's had that experience. Most people don't seem to realise you can do a little bit more with Google Scholar than people do, but it is a kind of, like Google, browse till you drop kind of thing. That's what it is. But it has a wide-ranging coverage. Therefore, it's of some interest to some of you to have a Google Scholar profile. All you need is a Google identity and you can go and set it up there. So, yeah, more comprehensive, probably mean a higher H-index. Yeah, I've made most of those points. And of course, you can use, it's not, Google Scholar is a sort of mess. It's not a highly controlled thing. You can't talk to the Google people, they won't answer your questions about it. But the URL that represents your Google Scholar profile can be used in the same way as the other IDs I've been talking about. Again, it's up to you whether you make it public or not. In eSpace, you can set it up. You go to Preferences. So you have to log in, of course. When you get to the eSpace platform, there's a little black option on the right for logging in, and you have to log in, and then you'll see a variety of things, including My Pubs, but Preferences, and amongst the preferences, I don't know what People Australia is, by the way, but you can set up for it to have that thing I've been talking about, that ID linking into your ORCID, your Google Scholar, and so on. Academic networks. Actually, I'll come back to these slides, but I'll just flick through them just to give you an idea of why I say it's a very vexatious territory. So there are plenty of others that I don't know about, or maybe others that I know about that I've just ignored, but we're talking about all of these platforms. So Microsoft Academic, you'll note that I talk about the numbers they claim with a certain amount of scepticism, especially the Microsoft one. It claims 20 million researchers across all fields, so it's not just science. It's not possible for me anyway to work out how many UQ authors are on Microsoft Academic. There are 126,000 publications that are attributable to UQ on Microsoft Academic. And those are the numbers for some areas of interest here in QAAFI. So you can draw your own conclusions about how important Microsoft Academic might be. Just, I suppose I should say, in case people have been, leading, just keeping to the UQ territory, maybe using RID and UQ eSpace and nothing else, or what these are about. The idea, there's sort of social networks for research is the idea behind them. So on these platforms you can do a range of things, and what you can do on them varies from platform to platform. But you can do things like share material, you can put your publications up there, you can create collaboration networks, and there's a range of things you can do. So yeah, Microsoft Academic though has been raising a fair bit of wrinkled brows, and that Nature blog article from earlier this year says that last year they only added 8,000 documents, which in the world of research is not a big number. Microsoft Academic sort of didn't really deign to specifically answer the questions that were asked in that blog item. They just said that they're developing a new platform, and all of these, that presumably they implied that a full entry of research documents will resume when the new platform is developed. But unnervingly, they didn't say when they were targeting a date for that new platform. Academia EDU, I put them in order of the numbers they claim. So Academia, as of last month, November, claims 15 million, which is a pretty suspicious jump from what they were claiming in June, 5 million in a few months. They cover all fields as well, like Microsoft. There are only 300 UQ researchers on Academia. and there's some indication there of that's not obviously the UQ people, like these numbers up here. Well, those numbers are UQ numbers actually, but these ones are the number of agriculture researchers on academia.edu. Those numbers there are the number of publications from UQ on Microsoft Academic Search. ResearchGate claims 5 million. They say they're for scientists, which is sort of encouraging. However, they do have social science and some arts and humanities, so they're obviously not very vigilant about being just for scientists. They've got some self-analysis on their site, and on the basis of that I came up with percentages of different areas of science on their website, which you can see there. And there are about 5,000 UQ authors on their site and about 27,000 publications on their site. I think that number sounds, a little bit low relative to the number of UQ researchers. While I can establish these figures on their sites, I'm not sort of necessarily believing them all. Scholar Universe claims 2,200,000 disciplines, very much across all areas, arts, humanities, business, 3,000 UQ researchers, and in the broad areas of interest here, those are the number of researchers. Researcher ID, and actually there's an incorrect figure. I just got an email from Researcher ID this morning, because that figure I came up with by looking at Researcher ID of 2,000 for UQ researchers I was very sceptical of. For example, I know that the UQ eSpace people a couple of months ago had, in the couple of months before that, added 500 UQ researchers to RID. As I said before, that you can ask UQ eSpace to get your publications from Researcher ID. You can also ask them to set you up a RID account if you want to. The IMB has made it, I understand, compulsory for people to have a RID account. And I didn't think to ask, but I don't know exactly what the scenario was when UQ eSpace added 500 new UQ RID accounts earlier this year. Anyway, the figure is now, I believe it's 3,050. I just checked my... Yes, it's 3,050, and that sounds more believable for the Researcher ID UQ researchers count. It claims about 250,000 researchers, and it is science with some social science as well, so it's not arts and humanities. I can't really work out the discipline coverage because they haven't got any, there's no grouping of topic areas that's meaningful. It's sort of like we're submitting an article to a journal and picking up author keywords at the last minute. They're pretty higgledy-piggledy, so I couldn't really come up with an estimate of coverage. ORCID has 1 million IDs, rather dishearteningly. They're only getting towards 200,000 of those IDs have publications, so what one can suspect is that various, presumably universities or research units, have said get an ORCID ID, or have said, like we have unit publication officers here at UQ in each section, maybe those kinds of people are pumping ORCID IDs in, and then nothing else happens because people don't even know they've got an ORCID ID. So it's sort of early days with the wide-ranging nature of ORCID. However, rather more encouraging, there are publications, 5 million publications, and 2 million of those have got DOIs, which is kind of nice. There's a lot of other stuff out there, a few of which I mentioned, one of which, Academic Karma, has been developed at UQ. It's a social network, although it's mostly designed for early career researchers, and it's designed to do sort of fast-track peer review. So that's the scene, the broad scene. Are there any questions about that before we go and look at some of these things? I'm not going to delve into, except for Researcher ID and ORCID, I'm not going to delve into all of these various social research, social network platforms. I suppose, I think Barbara was hoping I'd perhaps say, yeah, use this. Well, it's not my job to tell you to use any one of those. And besides, it's a decision you're going to have to make for yourself. You might be working in an area and you might have a lot of important collaborators who think ResearchGate is the best thing ever, and it might then therefore pay you to choose ResearchGate. I suppose the question is, should you be on all of these? I don't know. It depends on how much work it is for you to maintain an existence on all of them. The only thing I'd say is it's not a hell of a lot of use to be on a lot of these if you're not going to maintain your identity on them. Now. We're going to kind of step through some of this stuff, and we'll start on the Web of Science core collection, and I'm going to search for an author. This person isn't actually me. I forget whether I search with. Okay. This happens to be an innocent bystander, an ornithologist in the US who hasn't got a Researcher ID account, so I'm just borrowing his identity for a moment just to demonstrate a few things. And the other reason I chose him is he's not prolific. So from here, I can claim to have written these. So in those options which you'll be using for EndNote and so on, I can say I wrote these and send to. I'm going to go later on and delete my Researcher ID identity. So I'm going to sign in to Researcher ID. Actually, it went a little bit smoother than I was expecting, because I was actually thinking it would ask, because I haven't actually set up an ORCID identity, a connection between. I haven't got an ORCID identity. I'm not going to set one up either, but I haven't opted in for the relationship between Researcher ID and ORCID, and maybe because I've already done it, it hasn't repeated. What it did when I did this the other day was it asked me, as it went in to load these papers into Researcher ID, it asked me if I wanted to associate ORCID and Researcher ID. That's what I was trying to show you. So I'm disappointed with that as a demo. But nevertheless, it does illustrate how you can bring stuff into Researcher ID. So there's the page that I got. What it actually says is, as you go in, did you know you can associate your ORCID ID with your Researcher ID account? And it gives you the options. I would like to create an ORCID record. I already have an ORCID record, and no, thank you. And so we'll go to Researcher ID shortly, but while we're here, I just want to just show you again how this whole deal ramifies from one place to another.
Greg, I'm sorry, can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
It just accepted that you wrote those papers on ornithology. Is that it?
Actually, you will get challenged. Joy, you've been challenged, haven't you? Was that on the Researcher ID platform or on ORCID?
No, that was the eSpace people.
Oh, the eSpace people.
Had created a Researcher ID and was working with a group of researchers and had claimed their papers so that I could do some metrics. And eSpace updates in the week, it updates the publications on eSpace. And they got in touch with me and said, have you really written 500 publications in the last week? So eSpace is the one that was stopping.
If I did set up an ORCID ID, I would sort of hope that at some stage someone would challenge me, maybe the ornithologist or maybe ORCID would challenge me at some stage. But I mean, your question is valid. I won't say there's nothing to stop you from doing various things that you probably shouldn't do. As I've just seen, there are people who will stop you, there could be some pretty dodgy stuff out there. So this is just an example of a record for an article in the Web of Science Core Collection database, because I just wanted to show you, you won't see it necessarily when you open up a record, but if you look at these, so the authors are up the top there, and if you look at these author IDs, you'll see that the lead author, Fabricius, has their Researcher ID and their ORCID number in there, and if I click that number, I will go to Researcher ID or to ORCID, and I will be able to look at their papers, as long as they have an open Researcher ID. And so we're now in Researcher ID in Fabricius's area. These are some of the things you can do. I was going to use someone else as a demo, but in fact I'll skip that. You can have a look at that yourself, even if you haven't got a Researcher ID account. If someone has, you get them to let you look at that. I'm actually going a little bit longer than I meant to here. There you can see Fabricius's ORCID ID there. And I'm going to skip this too, if I logged in, I was going to log in with Joy's identity. If I logged into a Researcher ID, you have to be logged in for this. You don't, obviously I can't do it just looking at this woman's Researcher ID account. You'll get an option about exchanging data with ORCID. So you can, like if I was doing it, I would have a Researcher ID account and I'd keep that up to date. I'd let that be pumped into eSpace and I'd let it be pumped in from there to ORCID. And yes, I was going to show you some of our guides. I won't bother showing you the guides, but I'll show you where to go to get the guides on some of this stuff. So under Research Output and Impact, they're in the big links box on the library page under Research Support, Research Output and Impact. Multiple topics covered there, and the tab here for author identifiers provides you with some of the information in brief form that we're looking at today. Okay, and that'll do. That'll do for Researcher ID. Any questions there? Okay, ORCID. We will briefly nip into ORCID. And I'm taking advantage of my colleague Joy, who, as well as being a librarian, was a researcher. So, and so this is what an ORCID looks like, and you can actually do a range of things there. Describe yourself as fully as you like, but you can also pick up works from various platforms, some of which we've of course been talking about, and pump them into your researcher ID. That will do for ORCID. Any questions there? Okay, so moving rapidly, we'll now look at Scopus, and I'm going to do an author search in Scopus. And so Robert Henry has two identities on this database. You can merge those authors, as you can see there. So I've ticked both, and I can merge them, which I'm not going to do, not my business. But what I will do is go into the documents and go from there to Robert Henry's. There we go. Oh, that's what I wanted. His author space on this platform, and there are a range of things that you can do here, which are more substantial than just merging a couple of identities as a result of a specific search. You can do things which are about the identity on the platform as such. You can view potential author matches and so on, but you can request author detailed corrections here. It's a little bit more obvious on the Web of Science platform. If you're on the Web of Science platform, you'll see a column down on the right-hand side, and down towards the bottom of that is something that says something like that, request corrections. Now, confusingly, and it's sort of typical because Scopus is a little bit messy compared to Web of Science, they've actually got another way of doing that, and if you just do a Google... I mean, I can't find it on their platform, and I only found out about it fairly recently. It probably is a fairly recent innovation on their part, but if you do a Google search for Scopus Feedback Wizard, you'll find another way of correcting information about yourself on the Scopus site. So that was Scopus Feedback Wizard. So that, now I don't actually know what Scopus thinks the relationship is between this option here and the wizard, because I haven't initiated a wizard session. So if you've got any reflections, if you try that and you've got any reflections or complaints about it, I'd be really happy to hear about it. So that's Scopus. eSpace. I'll go from here. So in case eSpace is a new terminology to you, it's also under research support. And we've still got plenty of time for questions, so I'm not getting too rushed here. But I will say that one of the handouts I've given you has a number of specific bits of information and screenshots for eSpace. And one of them is that if you want to, instead of using your UQ created identity, like mine is UQGGEORG, you can give it your own name. And my colleague, another one of my library colleagues, has given her first name as her identity, and that makes it a little bit more, a little bit clearer if you decide to use your UQ eSpace identity as another thing that you're going to be popping around on various sites in your email address line and so on and so forth. She chose a first name, and so that's all that's required to get into her publications. And you'll notice, and this is the reason why I came here, you'll notice that Ambrin has set up all of the main things we've talked about, her Google Scholar identity and the others we've talked about, as links. So if I click on one of these links, I'll go to her Google Scholar publications and so on. When you go into, and this is, I guess this is an ID thing as well, when you go into eSpace, if you're looking for yourself and someone else, if you just use your author name, you won't necessarily find everything. When the library built eSpace, it was pretty innovative, and in fact the software, the open source software we used to build it, was taken and used by lots of people around the place. But it's a creaking wreck now, because the number of things we're trying to do from the eSpace platform, as I said, feed into HERDC and ERA and all these kind of things, are beyond the initial design. So they're writing a new design, and eSpace is a bit of a mess, and the eSpace people won't be offended by me saying that, but it's gradually been cleared up and so forth. But one of the messy aspects of it is, if you do search just with your name, you won't necessarily find everything that is you. So when you go into it, the thing to do is to, and I think I want to use somebody in particular just to show you, another point. If you go and put yourself or whoever it is you're looking into the author ID number field, and then pick yourself or whoever it is up from the drop down and pop the number in and then search with the number, you will get everything that is in eSpace that's associated with your eSpace author ID. I was going to make a couple of small points, but I'll drop a few of them. But one thing I'd just like to show you, you now know what these are, although we haven't talked about what some of them do. File downloads is a tracking of what you've got in eSpace, which is in full text, that people have taken. The abstract views is also an indication of interest in your work. I'll just put Steve Adkins' stuff in file download order. And you can see that you can come up with some pretty significant evidence of interest in your work. So that one that files to the top is over 1,000 downloads of one of Steve's papers. So that's a fairly significant indication of interest. What we're starting to talk about here, we're getting a bit off the topic, is other aspects to not your identity so much, but is what you can do with your identity and the tracking of interest in your work. It's not just about H indexes and so on. There are other ways of showing interest, and in fact the last column in eSpace is a thing called Altmetrics. If it comes up in questions, I'll show you an example of that, but I want to go to questions pretty much right now. So I was going to go to Peter Gressov's Google Scholar account, but I won't. We'll stop and have questions now.